Sense to me. All right, everybody. So we'll get started this evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jesse. I'm Reconnect Rochester's cycling manager. We have Jaheja Estel, our community engagement manager, Joe Bott from Veo, and David Riley from the city of Rochester here with us this evening. Reconnect Rochester did have a role back in 2017 bringing bike share to Rochester in the first place. It's very important for us to have micro mobility as part of the transportation mix here to get people where they need to go. We do view it as a public form of transportation, just as RTS. And so we've been in the habit of doing these recaps at the end of every season, which is just fascinating to see the stats and, where are people going in terms of heat maps and where are their destinations and, any unforeseen obstacles, how many rides taken, what the average trip length is, all that good stuff is stuff that we geek out to, and we know that some of you in the audience do as well. This is being recorded, so it'll go up on YouTube. Just briefly, Reconnect Rochester's mission, whether by bus, by rail, on bike, or on foot, we champion transportation choices that enable a more vibrant and equitable community. We want to see our community connected by a robust transportation network that makes it easy for everyone, regardless of physical or economic ability, to get around. With that, I'm going to pass it to David Riley with the City of Rochester for a few remarks, and then we'll hear from Veo.
Thanks a lot, Jesse. I'm David Riley. I'm a transportation planner in the City of Rochester's Department of Environmental Services. We really agree very much with what Jesse just said about micromobility. The city's committed to enhancing mobility for our residents and our visitors, and we think having a viable shared mobility program or micromobility program is an important part of meeting that goal. It offers people another option to get to work or daily destinations. It helps meet that first or last mile need at the start or the end of a trip by public transit. And it's a way for people to explore our city without needing a private motor vehicle to get around. So like Jesse said, the city's partnered with a few different operators since 2017 to operate bicycle share, and more recently, bike, e-bike, and e-scooter share. Last year, we held a competitive request for proposals process for a shared mobility operator, and we were pleased to select Veo to come to town as they were already operating a similar program, short trip away from here in Syracuse. So since the city entered a contract with Veo last summer, they've been working hard to hire a local team and to launch their program. They launched midsummer of last year, offering a mixed fleet of e-bikes and e-scooters. I hope I'm not stealing Veo's thunder when I say we've had really strong ridership in the program to date, really the best we've ever seen by far. So we're thrilled to see that. We think it shows that this program does meet an important need in the city's transportation system. Veo's been a really responsive partner. They're quick to address our concerns, making sure devices are distributed across each quadrant of the city, and offering membership options for low-income residents, people who lack smartphones or otherwise might have difficulty accessing a program like this. They also operated an extended season for the first time here in Rochester. We've typically ended the program November 1st, but this year Veo kept it going as weather permitted through early December. So overall, we're really pleased to have Veo as a partner, and we're looking forward to continuing to work with them to keep improving the program and expanding the program in 2024. So thanks, Jesse.
All right, so just to remind everybody, there's a Q&A box at the bottom. So over the course of this presentation, feel free to drop questions in there as opposed to the chat. You can use the chat if you want to talk back and forth, but for questions to hear from Veo, we want to use that Q&A feature. So I guess we can pass it to Joe, who's going to share a screen and show us some cool stuff.
Thanks, Jesse, and Jaja, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. I really appreciate David being here. Not to echo everything that he said, but it's been a great partnership to start. We're super excited about Rochester, and so I think we've really developed a good working relationship, and we're Veo from the very beginning. Our conversation with the city is that we want to be a long-term partner. We want to be here for an extended period of time. We know that there's been some that have come and gone. So, that's why we're trying to do everything that we can to make sure that we're, continuing to grow and make the program what Rochester wants it to be. We often say that, it's our job to kind of make sure that we show up in Rochester the way Rochester expects us to, fully recognizing that what's good for Rochester, maybe maybe similar to Syracuse, but different, might be different than what's needed in Washington, D.C. or Charlottesville, Virginia. So we try to bring that, kind of approach to our service here. But I do have a little presentation dialed up. I saved some of the ridership stuff, which is probably the most interesting stuff for the end, only because I wanted to get through a couple things to kind of to tell you a little bit about us if you're unfamiliar, and also to kind of talk through, I think, some of the priorities that we've really targeted from the beginning, but we're hoping to kind of build on from 23 to 24 as well. So bear with me for 1 second. Okay. Shai, we good? Can you see that? Great. Okay. All right. So as I said, my name is Joe Bott. I'm a policy and partnerships manager at Veo. My job is to again make sure that we're showing up in Rochester the way we're supposed to. I meet with David and with city partners regularly to make sure that we're doing the things that we need to do, that we're making adjustments that we need to make. And so I'm not local to Rochester, but I live in Cleveland, Ohio, so not a short, not a long drive down 90. And so I've spent a little bit of time in Rochester over the course of this past year, and I have some ties to kind of Buffalo and the Western New York area. So I think Rochester is a fun market for me because it's very similar to the area that I live in a lot of ways. So it's been fun to kind of work throughout this year on the different projects we've been doing with David and the city. Quickly, just about Veo, we were founded in 2017. At the end of June, we added Rochester to one of our portfolio of about 50 markets. One thing that sort of sets us apart is we design and manufacture our own devices, and we also operate them with local teams. And really, kind of the big headline from 2023 was that in just 5 months, Veo's ridership surpassed the full single season ridership of I think every previous shared mobility provider, which was really impressive. I can tell you from the Veo side of things, we expected it to be good, but I think Rochester was a surprise market in terms of how enthusiastic everybody was. I mean, even from the launch event, walking around City Hall with devices, people were stopping us and asking us questions, and that enthusiasm really didn't wane throughout the year. So it was really, really impressive season and really cool to see, a city that, I think when you look up articles and things about micromobility, you're probably not going to see the Clevelands and Rochesters and the, the Midwestern cities kind of sometimes don't get the limelight. But I think it shows that we're just as much in need of these types of transportation solutions as everywhere else. A little bit more about us. We hire 100% locally. Our local team is run by our operations manager, Jason Finkminer. We have a warehouse in Rochester, and he has a team of about 13 technicians and mechanics. We don't use the gig economy model, so you won't see people in U-Hauls like throwing all of our scooters in the truck to go charge them up. We utilize a swappable battery. Our technicians work all 3 shifts, so 24 hours a day. We're going servicing vehicles, swapping batteries, and making sure that the maximum amount of devices are accessible all the time. Recognizing that transportation is not 8 to 5. It's an all the time thing for a lot of people. And then lastly, we just as David said, we want to make sure that by having a local team that we're responsive and accessible to the city and its residents. I think one of the things we're kind of looking forward to doing in 2024 is David's been a tremendous help and partner, and he's fielded phone calls and answered questions, but we're really hoping to draw some direct lines to us. Our customer service is very accessible, but we found that at times people, even though our phone number and our email and everything's on the devices, people don't always have a direct line to us. And so, we've had some conversations with 311 about, possible integration and some other things, but I think that's one of the things we're looking to do is to try to draw a straight line to us. Because many times we don't hear about something until it's been going on for an extended period of time, and then we seem unresponsive, and we want to be responsive. I think David would tell you, when he brought an issue to us that needed attention, we were dealing with it in a matter of minutes, hours, not days, weeks, things like that. So safety, safety obviously is a huge priority to the city amongst other things. But I think when you look at our devices and the things that we do, we try to use our app, and we have in-app reminders to people. This is an example of like the checklist you'll see if you use the devices. And also all of our devices are built with safety in mind from the ground up. So, our underdeck lighting, it's, each generation we try to make it brighter. We have integrated turn signals in our devices. So we're trying to, and honestly, if you have feedback for us about, things that you'd like to see, we have literally taken rider feedback and incorporated into some of the things that we do. So please feel free to share, those things if you have them, even if not today, in the future. Again, I think this is one of the last slides on safety, but happy to report that this year, and when looking at the amount of rides, 99.9999% were completed without incident. That's not a made up number. That is literally how the math works out. When you look at reported collisions and versus the number of rides. So, from there, we like that number. And is there a lot of room to improve on that number? Not really, but we can continue to do it as the program continues to grow. And we want to maintain that number. We want to find new ways to reach people. And whether it's holding events and doing demos where we can show people how to ride safely, or handing out free helmets and things like that. Those are the types of things we're going to look to do to make sure that we kind of maintain that level going forward. Parking. So parking is an area of emphasis for us, and I think we use GPS technology to geofence areas that you can ride and you can't ride in, where you can park, where you can't park. And so when you come out of your first initial launch year, I think the key is to really take a step back and see what we've learned from the rider behaviors. We didn't know what to expect in terms of how people would ride in Rochester and how it would be received. But we have some tools to try to make sure that people do the things they're supposed to do. We put out a video with the city explaining good parking behavior. Park like this, not like this. We also require people to submit an end of ride photo showing that they've parked correctly. And so there's we have tools that we can use, and we try to use carrots versus sticks to the extent possible, because we tend to find that most people want to do the right thing, but from a user experience standpoint, we need to make it as easy as possible. And so we're in the process now of kind of looking back at what data from last year we can see, and what information and complaints and things we got, and then see how we can address it with new solutions going forward. This is just just an example of like one of our handouts that we would hand out at an event, or a demo, to kind of just explain or give reminders of good parking behavior and parking tips. And I think this is this list here is kind of my sort of thought path for 23 to 24. I think when Jesse mentioned what were some unexpected challenges, I think the biggest unexpected challenge for me was that the transition from dockless, from dock mobility with the previous provider to dockless, a dockless system with Veo. I think there were just a number of calls that were received, I think, by David and by our customer service, almost saying, are these supposed to be here? There's a scooter on the sidewalk. It's not in the way and it's not bothering anybody, but is it supposed to be here? Should somebody come pick it up? And I think, we sort of were caught off guard by, there were a number of stories that came out, some media stories. I was on Rochester News at one point, sort of explaining, the transition, that the previous provider was a dock station, even though there were some exceptions to that, and then that we were a dockless provider, and trying to explain the value of that. I think that's an important thing that we have to continue to talk about. Understanding that parking and keeping things organized and everything's important. There's also a lot of value and utility in what equates to kind of a free floating system, where where you have recommended parking locations, but you're able to really take the vehicle door to door. I just know what we've seen in a lot of places, and even in my own personal experience, if you have to walk a half a mile to find a device and you go and you can't find one, you may not make that trip again. You're going to probably just use your car, or you're going to walk or do something else. But so we want to make sure that we're getting enough information and outreach out to the public about how the system works, what you know what the transition to dockless means for them, and what the value and utility of that is. Um, the data informed decisions piece is really us looking at I'll show you some heat maps in a bit, but really kind of looking and saying, okay, we have some parking capacity we put in. What type of information can we glean from rider behavior this year to make parking better? Whether if we see an area that has a lot of, there's a lot of activity, but not a lot of parking capacity, then that's an area we need to add capacity to. Otherwise, we're either not going to get people riding in those locations, or they're going to not know what to do with their device when they get there. And so I think, parking capacity and coverage kind of leans into that next thing on the list here, but that's what we're looking to do. We're trying to gather the data from 2023 and make parking, make noticeable parking improvements, through capacity, coverage, and also improving the user experience so that people know what they're supposed to do when they get to the end of their to their destination. When we talk about improving the user experience, that kind of generally means what are ways that we can make parking simpler in places we need to. If there's a congested area, like if you look at the photo on the right, the top picture is a corral, what we would call like a physical corral. And sometimes that's helpful just because if there's not a device where you go to park and you've never parked before, you may not know what to do with it. Versus if you see a number of them lined up or you see white paint on the ground, you can sort of deduce that, okay, I'm supposed to put it inside the square. And we've really been able to see throughout the country that, where parking is made easier, where compliance is made easier, when people are in a hurry, they're late for class, they're late for work, they're trying to catch the bus. They don't have to spend extra time trying to figure out what to do to end their ride and move forward. I see a question popped up here.
We can address those at the end.
Oh, sure. Yep. Okay. And then the last, and it's kind of all, it's a little bit hand in hand, but improving public understanding is another part of this. We want this. The more people understand about the service or understand about the benefit of it, the less likely they are to really oppose it or be against it. Even if they don't utilize it, it's important to explain to them the values of the service to those individuals. We do an annual rider survey, which we weren't able to do in Rochester because we didn't have a complete season, but we will be able to do one for the 24 season next year, which has a lot of cool information about demographics and why people are using it, how they're using the devices. But one of the things that we've sort of found is that in a lot of markets, upwards of 20% of car trips are directly replaced with trips on our vehicles. And so if you're a person who drives a car and you don't use a scooter, you still benefit from there being 20% less cars on the road and competing with 20% less cars when you're trying to get a parking spot and things like that. So I think there's benefits and there's utility to it, but we have to figure out, the ways to sort of I think improve public understanding and appreciation for this. And also, to be fair to those people as well, like we don't want devices blocking their path or being in their way. And we want to make sure we're showing up for them how they want us to as well. It's not just about the riders. It's also about, it's about the community and making sure that we're doing, that we're running a system and a program that's working for everybody and not hindering anybody. All right, community engagement. I'm almost to the ridership stuff, so bear with me for one more minute. This is just a brief thing to say. In an abbreviated season, it's really difficult to move beyond the launch, which is a very intensive time and an intensive process to really be able to kind of like dig down and set the roots that we want to set and be a member of the community. We want to we're really looking to find. We were fortunate. Reconnect Rochester was very helpful to us, very patient with us, but also just invited us to Rock Street Films, and they were we provided some safety information and handout sheets about our devices, and they amplified those things for us. So for us, it's about and we had other partnerships as well with some neighborhood organizations and things, but we want to be able to find, not just our champions, but also we want to develop relationships with, there's benefits to our Veo Access program, our reduced fare program. If we can find strategic partners, who are providing wraparound services to people to say, hey, I think you'd benefit from this, this program, you should look into it, or I'll help you sign up. Developing partnerships with the business community, make sure that, that we're connecting people to them to help them, and not just, creating an issue for them that they have to deal with. So I think, we're looking to also, build some relationships with, some of the universities, some of the larger employers, just to kind of, really put our money where our mouth is in terms of talking about being a partner. I mean, a lot of people use the term partnership. We really try to back it and make sure that we are, we're, even if we're not, I'm not personally local to Rochester, but we have a local team there, and we, we want to show up and do a good job. And I think part of that is figuring out ways to be engaged with the community in meaningful ways, and that's what we're going to do in 2024. All right, ridership. Okay, so as we kind of talked about, maybe vaguely, this season kicked off June 26th. We were a little delayed in our launch, just due to some external factors that we had to sort of navigate, but we were able to extend the season to December 11th, as David said. That's, our plan is to try to have the devices on the road next season as soon as possible and for as long as possible. Obviously that March date is tentative. As I said, I live in Cleveland, so I understand that March may be great, but it's going to snow in April. So we're going to try to do our best to make sure that we're on the roads when we can be, when it makes sense to, so that we don't have to, start and stop. And we're already, very deep into the planning process for that going into next season. Big highlights for us, over 130,000 rides, over 10,000 unique riders. Those numbers were, as I said, they were, I think, surprising. I think every call we got on with the city, we kind of expected, oh, maybe they're going to wane a little bit, and they just really stayed pretty strong, throughout the season. So we're really looking forward to seeing what happens next year. Wanted to briefly touch on Veo Access and Veo Plus. So Veo Access is our low income pricing model. If you receive any form of public assistance, whether that's federal, state, or even some local programs, you can apply through our customer service. And if you're approved, you would pay $5 a month. You'd have no unlock fees, and it's 20 cents a minute after. And you get one free ride up to 30 minutes a day, and it's 20 cents a minute thereafter. So we tried to do some outreach on Veo Access and kind of build up, understanding about the program. Obviously, we still have work to do compared to the relative number of rides, but 100 plus members this year in an abbreviated season took almost close to 5,000 rides on the reduced fare program. So again, goal for 2024 is to find those strategic partners. I think for me personally, I've always looked at Veo Access. I think traditionally kind of said, here's the program, here's the information about it. And I think, trying to be more, more conscious about the reality of maybe some families who are in that circumstance, just asking them to do another thing isn't really as helpful as we could be. So we're hoping to find some strategic partners, whether it's, job and family services, or people who are helping assist people to, get steady employment, or, any other, like I said, wraparound service provider who can kind of say, look, I think you'd benefit from this program, I'm going to help you sign up. I think that's more of the outreach that we're trying to build into our model for next year. Veo Plus also launched in 2023. That is our regular membership. In that I think you pay $8.99 a month, and you have no unlock fees. So you just pay by the minute. It's been a really cool program. We've seen a lot of retention and a good savings for regular riders. I know if you're riding every single day, or you take like a quick 30-second ride, I mean, you may start to see that these unlock fees are kind of adding up a little bit. So it gives you a really good savings. It'll show you what you save with each trip. So we launched that, I think, in the middle of the season, so it wasn't even to measure it with our launch in June, and we still had 700 people sign up and over 11,000 rides under the Veo Plus program. So these are just kind of the, the sort of, I think, big headlines here. You know, over 10,000 unique riders. We had, oh, sorry, back up here. Over 130,000 rides, over 300,000 miles, and over 1 million minutes. Average trip distance was 1.37 miles. We right now we have tentatively, believe there's been over about like around 13,000 plus connections to transit. We were able to look. Our friends at RTS provided us with their top 25 bus stop locations, and we were able to punch those latitudes and longitudes into our system and figure out how many trips started and ended at or right by a RTS station. And so we're still kind of putting the rest of the data together citywide, which could take a little bit more time, but really excited to see that like a large number of trips are starting, around transit. I think it sort of helps to dispel the myth that's out there that, it's just kind of for fun. I think people are, in Rochester in particular, are using them probably for a whole host of different reasons, but to get to work, to get to appointments, all sorts of stuff. So it was really cool to see that. And then lastly, we kind of estimated using the putting some of our data together that, based on the miles traveled, and the, amount of trips that would likely have been replaced by a vehicle using our kind of nationwide statistic. That's why this is an estimate, but over 59,000 pounds of CO2 saved is our estimate right now for what we see as, this year's ridership, helping with. So, with that, I have a small guessing game, and so you can throw these answers in the chat if you want to guess. But I have the two top, and you don't have to if you don't want to, but thought we'd make it interactive and make it fun since we're hanging out after work today. Let's see if you can correctly guess the top 2 trip origin and top 3 destination points for 2023. So we'll play the Jeopardy music in our heads, and then we'll see what they are. While I'm doing that, I'll take a look. I know we're going to do questions then, but I'll take a look at that. No guesses? Not even Jesse? Jesse, you don't have a guess? Oh, there you go.
I looked at this briefly beforehand,
Oh,
so
you
I know
did.
the
You
answer.
cheated. That's right. That's right. I shouldn't say you cheated, but you had the answers to the test. You looked in the back of the book.
We do have a couple of guesses coming through.
Yep.
Cody says the origin guess is U of R or College Town, and destination is the transit center. And then Bill McDonald says the transit center as well.
Okay. Well, you guys are pretty good. I think although it's a little different on the origin. So here you go. Here's the answer. So Franklin and East Maine, like right by the Liberty pole, and the I Love Rock sign, there were 2,120 trips. RTS Transit Center was also a top origin, which around 1,700. Franklin, East Maine, Court Street and Chestnut Street was another destination in the Midtown Commons. I think Court Street and Chestnut Street was a number of high ridership areas right around, I think, Martin Luther King Jr. Park, and I think there's a couple other things over in that area, but those were the top origins and destinations for this year. All right, here is a heat map of starts on the left and ends on the right. I also have, after this slide, I've got a ride path, which I think is really kind of interesting. I think, one of the things that we're sort of talking about in terms of, previewing for 2024, is that, this year, as you can tell, rides are limited to, our service area is not the entire city. And part of the reason for that is because, and the main reason for that is because, coming into a launch season, Part of what we were trying to do is to learn lessons from previous providers in a sense. And one of those things is you can't overextend yourself too quickly. And so we needed to learn and gather this information about, how the operational side of things was going to work, getting our local team trained and all those things. And then just kind of having the chance to sort of see, okay, how is this going to go? And then shift from there. We do have, we're working with the city right now to kind of identify, areas for expansion. I don't have an answer of when those things will happen, if they'll be commensurate with launch or otherwise, but obviously the goal is to be able to service, the entire city in effect. But it's just, we have to, part of what's put us in the position that we're in, and part of what has been like a major key to our success is that we've been conservative in our approach. We're selective about our partners. We're selective about how we, about not overextending ourselves. And so, we're looking to make those things, and we're trying to, kind of plan ahead for expanding into new areas, and make sure that we have, parking capacity and infrastructure and hubs and all those things lined up before we're even, so that, and also, making sure that we reach out to you and your community members, so to say, hey, do you see a value here? Let's get some local, feedback from you on the areas you'd like to see them, and areas where, we might need to have like a no ride zone or a no parking zone. So I think that, we're trying to be smart and calculated about that, but that's a little bit of a tangent from the heat map, but that's why you see such a concentration downtown. And to give you kind of an idea, if you look, see where my mouse is, like out in these outer, lightly, just greens with no yellow, you're looking at, single to low double digit rides. And then as you work your way in, you get into the, the 3, 4, and even sometimes low 5 digits here in the middle and right in downtown. I think you'll notice this more on the trip path, but you can also kind of see that there's, sort of the funnels of where people are coming from on a zoomed out picture. But when you look at this next slide, which is this is my favorite thing to look at, and I'll explain a little bit of how this works. This is our ride path heat map, and what that means is our devices emit a signal every certain number of seconds, and so this is a composite of all of those device pings basically. And what I think is interesting about it is, like, you obviously see like some of these main thoroughfares where you've got like a darker yellow concentration where people are obviously coming in. But I think the things out here are kind of what interests me. You see a lot of, people who are traveling like straight line here, and then they're either going, downtown, or they're just going somewhere along this area. So I think it's cool to see, or even up here. This is pretty far outside of the downtown. It's just interesting to me to see that people are traveling, and you could tell from starts and ends, if you go back one slide, trip starts, they're pretty much kind of all over the map. It's not as if everything is here and then everything's out here, or everything's contained in this area. A lot of people are taking scooters from out of downtown to downtown, and from in downtown, back to either the residence or other destinations, which I think is a very cool, I think it shows just, I think, the overall utility of the system and how it's being used. Again, though, I think to me, and maybe I know this is not probably as like a traditional heat map. I mean, if you're used to seeing like red, blue lines or things like that, but I think it tells an interesting story, and it's worth kind of like, when we have the opportunity to kind of dive into some of these things and say, okay, well, I was actually surprised personally that the RTS Transit Center was one of the top ends and destinations. Just because I thought there's a number of other areas that might have been, and there were some that were close, that had a couple hundred, starts or ends. But it was interesting to me that was just so very clearly defined that people were going to that location and from it. But yeah, so I know I talked quickly, but it is 7:35, and so I wanted to make sure I left time for questions and to go back and cover anything, but largely that's really kind of the end of my sort of presentation. But wanted to sort of leave some time to answer any specific questions, or talk through any more things in detail. Happy to do it.
Joe, is it something that you have handy, just like the number of assets deployed in 2023? Obviously, day to day that fluctuates, but was there a target number or an average number or a peak number for
Yes.
2023?
Yes. So our deployment fluctuated between 300 devices at launch and about 500 devices, depending on kind of demand and some other things. We're making plans right now. Our target deployment for March, April, our tentative launch in 2024 is to have at least 700 be deployed at that point. Our fleet cap is around 1,000 devices, I believe, and so the goal is obviously to get you want to get deployed at a good number, and then you want to stay deployed as close to the cap as you can. But you have to absorb, throughout the year we have, maintenance things and devices that we lose from time to time. So that's the goal though. So we should be entering 24, in the substantial positive column for deployed devices.
That's great. Do you have a sense from 2023 what the share was between the number of scooters that were out there versus the number of e-bikes? Was it mostly scooter trips that you saw?
No, it was, I think I may be able to find that for you. It was, so we launched with scooters initially, and so it's a little bit skewed. We had, I think we had it was like 300, 200 stand-up scooter to seated e-bike. And the reason for that was because we launched with the stand-ups initially, and we had planned to do like a phased launch with the Cosmo e-bike, but those you have to assemble them and some other things. So those were just a little bit slower to be deployed than we expected. So I don't know what the split will be next year. I imagine it may be a little bit more Cosmo E heavy than last year, just because those are typically our most popular device, and people travel with them about not quite twice as far, but maybe just under twice as far as they do on a stand-up device.
Mhm. Just to piggyback off of Jesse's question, so do you have an estimate for how many more vehicles there will be for this upcoming season?
Yeah, we should have at least the plan is to be, again, when we launch at 700, so that would be about 200 more than last year's peak. I think our average last year was probably closer to 300 or 400. And so we expect to be at around 700 at launch, and then again we'll be working as quickly as we can to get up to the cap. So we're hoping to be at 1,000 devices within a number of weeks from when we launch.
Yeah, that's great. And I know you showed sort of this heat map as sort of representative of where Veo is kind of stationed, or where the assets are stationed around Rochester. So are there still plans for this upcoming season to expand throughout the city of Rochester, or anything to that sort?
Yeah, so I touched on it a little bit, but I think more specifically, that's one of the conversations we're having with the city is how quickly can we expand to other areas. Obviously, we know that it's a important piece of this for the city, and important priority for them from day one has been equity and accessibility, and so we want to we have to kind of balance. We have to balance not overextending ourselves, but also recognizing that like we want to have a plan so that when we do expand, we're doing it correctly. We're having conversations with the right people to make sure that if there's an area that is kind of excited about them and wants them that we're kind of strategically moving. But yeah, the plan is definitely to I can't say with certainty that we would be able to expand in 24 into the entire city boundary. But that's what we're working towards.
Awesome. So we do have a couple of questions that I want to make sure that we get to for the attendees here. So the first question that came in during the presentation was from Tom, and he asked, is there a way to identify if someone's at a specific location but they couldn't find a vehicle? Is there a way for Veo to say, like, okay, clearly there's a need for more vehicles in this area, if people try to go to a location and they aren't able to find a vehicle?
Yeah. So one thing they could do, they could really just honestly, they could reach out to our customer service and say, hey, I'm in this neighborhood and I'm looking at the map and there's no corrals here, right? And they would flag that for our operations team and for me to then, take a look at it. And I think what would happen is, Jason, our operations manager, would go out and look at the area and say, you know what, you're right. There's no parking capacity or density here. Let's find a couple locations to put, and then we would just make sure that if there's a demand that we're making sure when we rebalance devices and we're putting them, in corrals to be used, that we are, making sure that we have adequate coverage in the places that people want to use them.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you so much.
Sure. And also, and if I could, it's also happy to receive feedback in any way. If you have a relationship with Reconnect Rochester and and there's you put it to them, I'm sure they'd get it to us. And also, I think, maybe we can probably, I may talk with the people that handle our annual survey and maybe see if there's, as part of a survey question, like, did you use Veo this year? No. And if the reason was that because you didn't have like there weren't devices in your area, then maybe that's something that some data we could gather to kind of, inform our decisions going forward. But we would absolutely accept that from anywhere. Throughout the year, I received a number of inquiries from, different business owners or places saying, hey, I saw these and I saw there was, it looked like they were parked outside. I'd like to have one outside my business. Can you do that? And we were, sure, responsive to it and happy to do it. So.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that. So Bill had a question. He had two questions. So he says, how many scooters and e-bikes were stolen or damaged? And is this better or worse than other cities? Which I'm sure you've gotten that question a lot throughout the season.
Yeah. It's funny. Obviously we sort of prepare for, different types of vandalism in different areas. And different markets have different types. So like some markets that we have, certain hardware issues and we have to make hardware improvements to try to prevent them. The big thing we saw, here was, it really was kind of like what we call like device hoarding. And so we had people who would like take the devices and maybe because they wanted to make sure they had one to ride later or they were worried that they weren't going to be here and they would like physically remove them from the street and like take them to their, homes or apartments. And so we worked together with the city and with a representative from the police department just to say, we put like a letter together that basically says, hey, we know this is here, we can see it's here. Can you please just put it outside? In no questions asked. We just want it back. You shouldn't have it in your apartment. I mean, it's really important that people don't. The devices are safe, but they're not meant to be, stored and people trying to charge them and tamper with them. That's when you can, when they, you can have a problem. And also, once the device runs out of battery and goes offline, then, we have trouble recovering. And so I would say that I don't have an answer for you, Bill, in terms of, the total number of loss or percent loss. I know it wasn't something that we were regularly talking about, like, this is really, really a bad problem. The hoarding was the bigger problem. And also, there were some people who were in the course of hoarding them where they were like trying to charge people, to ride them and, like charging $20 to ride it down the street and things like that. So we tried to just kind of get ahead of that and stop that from happening so that it didn't sour things for people who didn't know that that's how the program didn't work. But overall, it was not. I can't. It's hard for me to say like a direct comparison to other cities, but I can just say that it wasn't something. Our experience was overwhelmingly positive, and wasn't really soiled by that conversation. I see the last question. Was there another one too, or is this just the tricycle one's the last one that I see?
I think that's the only
Okay.
remaining one.
Okay. So, great question. We're in the process of we're developing two vehicles. So that we actually, the Cosmo itself is, in many ways our most accessible device at this point, just because not everybody's comfortable standing. It has a lower center of gravity. It's got pneumatic tires. People tend to feel it's a little sturdier for some people. I mean, if you're riding on, when you guys hit the roads in March and April, after the plows have been on them, that there's going to be, there'll be some, some repair work that needs done, and I think that they absorb them really well. I do think that, one of the things we're looking at for this coming year is piloting. If you've looked at our website, there's a device called the Apollo, which would be our first two-seater device. And so it's a seated scooter that can hold two people and carry some cargo with it. Idea being that, like, if you are traveling with somebody who isn't, you're not personally comfortable riding or driving, or you have some sort of disability or vision impairment, or you're just not comfortable being at the helm, you'd be able to ride with somebody and still experience micromobility and use it. And so we're looking at piloting that device in some markets this year. We also are, from a tricycle standpoint, we are working. Our hardware team is. I want to preface this with we're at like stage 0, but we've been trying to develop a self-balancing tricycle that would be really geared toward being as accessible to persons with disabilities as possible. It would have storage space in the back. It could potentially live on the street and be a shared device, or we're still trying to kind of figure out what the model would be, whether it'd be shared or whether it'd be something you would rent through us directly. But we are in the process of, we've been having a couple of demonstrations where we've taken our prototype and met with some folks and said, hey, tell us what you like, give us your feedback. What about this would be challenging? What about this would make it as accessible as possible? And the feedback we've gotten has been really positive, just because I think the response was almost like, we're so happy that you're talking to us about this. And so it was really cool to kind of hear, and things that we would never have thought of, right? I mean, we said, what do you think of the throttle? And they said there should be a throttle on both sides, or there should be different mechanisms because not everybody has the same abilities. And so we're really trying to, it's on our hardware team's list of things to do and work towards. So we're going to continue to try to build on that. And obviously the device, even if it was a tricycle and designed with that purpose, could be ridden by anybody who just would feel more comfortable on a 3-wheel device. So yeah, thanks for the question, Bill. Appreciate it.
Can you clarify just with the Cosmo? It's a seated scooter, right? I mean, when you pedal it like the motor doesn't kick in when you pedal. It's only with the thumb throttle, right?
You can pedal. You can do both. You can pedal and hit the throttle, but you don't. It's not as like some e-bikes where you like you have to pedal to engage the throttle. You could do either. You could throttle without it, or you could pedal if you felt inclined to do it.
Okay, we have a question here from Lynn. Do you think that Veo will ever be in the surrounding towns outside the city limits?
It's a good question. Hard one for me to answer off the cuff. I mean, I think I think the best way to answer it would be to say that if there's a way, understanding all the things that I said about how we try to be, not overextend ourselves, and we want to make sure that we're contracted with Rochester, the city of Rochester. So our priority is to deliver a service to them and make sure that we are there long term, and we comply with the things that they want us to do and to show up how they want us to show up. That said, if at some point down the road that there was a community that made, a nearby community that made sense in terms of how people are getting around, and there was like maybe an interconnectedness to involve them in what we're doing, that's a possibility. Or it's also possible that those could be run as separate markets if there's a place that makes sense to do it. So I can't give you a direct answer, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. It's really just, I think, a matter of one of the things we kind of try to look at, like, just to give you a simple example, in some places we don't expand to the entire town, but we find that the nearby community has a grocery store that's it's on the border, but just on the other side. And so everybody's driving their scooters and dropping them at this point, right? So like we have conversations with communities like that and say, is there a way we could open up service to this? Obviously, this destination is popular and people would benefit from being able to get there. And so like, we're always open to that. We try to be as practical as possible. But I think, if there's a place that might make sense, I mean, we've been contacted by a couple nearby communities, but I think, we're certainly open to the conversation because, if there's a universe where we can make it makes sense and not have it pull away from what we're doing in Rochester, then we're certainly happy to have it.
Can you clarify what happens now when someone takes a scooter or an e-bike outside the city limits? Does the like motor kick off, or what if someone uses it to get to work in Henrietta or Irondequoit? What would happen?
So it should, in a perfect world, it should slow and stop working once it leaves the geofence area. What happens a lot of times, and the reason we have devices that are out there, sometimes people like, we actually had one at one point that somebody, if they put it in their car and drove it somewhere, they think it'll work there, and then they find out it doesn't and they leave it. Our devices transmit tons of information to us. And so if it leaves the service area or it's damaged or the battery's running below a certain percentage, our operations team's automatically alerted, hey, you got to come pick this up. Or you need to go find this device and retrieve it because it's outside of the service area, that type of thing. And obviously it's in our interest, we want to get those and collect those and put them back in because it's not doing us any good sitting out in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, to answer your question, it should shut down. It may not do it if you're like within a certain distance of the edge of the fence, but it will do it not long thereafter.
Would the user get a message like on their phone that they're outside the area?
There should be an audible. So we have a feature called Veo Voice on our devices. There should be an audible alert to them that they've left the service area and they need to return. Similar to if you enter a no ride zone, or something like that, or a slow speed zone, the device will actually say to you out loud. It won't like beep at you. It says out loud, hey, you've entered a no ride zone. Please exit this area as soon as possible.
All right. Is that all the questions?
All the questions from the attendees. I did have another question for you, Joe. I was curious if people would need to, who signed up for Veo Access this previous season, will they need to requalify for this upcoming season, or will it just roll over?
I know we have there's a renewal process.
Okay.
I don't know offhand how it works, but I know that if they would be, if they don't renew for some reason, then they would just have to contact customer service and reapply. I think, and they could probably just share the same documentation they shared before. I don't know what that cadence is though offhand, if it's 90 days, if it's the whole season or what. I think it's but I could try to find out and let you know.
Yeah, that'd be great to know. Thank you.
Sure.
I think that's all the questions that we've gotten here.
All right. Well, this was great.
Cool. Thanks so much for having me and for listening to me talk about Veo and our relationship with Rochester. But as I said, we're super excited about 2024. Please share your feedback with us either through customer service or your friends at Reconnect Rochester. And we'll obviously do our best to try to to take what we can and build on this year going to next year.
All right. Well done. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Yep. Thanks,
See you
guys.
soon.
Bye.